Hello guys and welcome to another video. In the last one I told you about the community project that started some days ago, and let me tell you that so far the reaction from the community side has been just incredible. Today we've got around 50 people working on the project right now, and they come from all the different areas. So we've got concept artists, 3D artists, as well as musicians, story writers, programmers and VFX artists. But what is even more interesting is that we have members of all different skill levels, so from people that just installed the engine some weeks ago to really professional guys that have years of experience in the industry and that already worked on major titles like Call of Duty, for example. Also, I just wanted to let you know that now and during the whole course of the development, you are always free to still join us, and if you want to do so, just register for Discord, join the server, and send me a private message telling me what you want to do. Alright, even though we've got so many people working on the project already, it is still a community project, and because of that, it's your voice that matters, and not only the ones of the people that participate actively in the project. We did some preparation work for you, so we discussed all the different game genres and came to the conclusion of 7 options that we think could be realistic to be turned into a game by us. Now it will be your job to decide on the genre you want to see the most. Also, if you have multiple favorites, as always in my votings, you can select multiple options here and then hit vote if you really can't decide. The voting will last until Tuesday, and what we are going to do then is we will have a look at the 3 options with the highest amounts of votes, and then I will tell the game designers about those options. We will discuss all of them in detail, and finally then come to a conclusion as to what type of game we can most identify with and what we want to put into practice. Alright, so for the ones that maybe don't really know what all those genres mean, let me quickly go through all of the options and just give you a brief summary of what we are going to do. So first option here is a horror and mystery game. Those are usually done in first person, and what's special about them is that there is a very dark atmosphere and the player has to fight and escape some kind of threat in order to survive. Also, we will make use of an hopefully awesome but definitely very gloomy story, maybe something like an apocalyptic scenario. And we will try everything to scare the player using some special effects and horrifying characters. Example for horror and mystery games would be games like Until Dawn or Silent Hill that I think most of you may already have heard of. The next option we will find here is the real-time strategy game. I guess that most of you are familiar with this kind of genre. It's already existing for quite a long time, so might remember it from games like Age of Empire or Battle for Middle-earth. Of course, we will take some of those traditional elements like units, walking around in a map, trying to find resources, then creating some buildings and fighting against each other. But we will of course try to incorporate new elements like telling a real story throughout the game, which is quite uncommon for traditional RTS games. So maybe we could have a story about someone conquering a different land and fighting all kinds of rulers there. Also, real-time strategy games always feature different maps. There will be levels where you just have to survive in some kind of badland, or other ones in which you will have to take over a massive city and fight your way through this. Next option is a JRPG, which stands for Japanese RPG. Those games contain many elements from the Western RPGs that we are used to, like inventory systems, various quests, a world map, open world and so on. The only real difference is that the combat system is turn-based, so you've got quite a lot of time to think about what you're going to do next, which is why they're also often called strategical role-playing games. Also, there are various characters fighting together in a group, which all have different abilities, both actively and passively, and usually there are many boss fights in those games. Further, it is very easy to include an epic story in the JRPG that will not only deal with a single protagonist, but with a whole group that slowly comes together and tries to accomplish their goals together. Then there will of course be something like an open world that the player can discover, find new items or equipment and use that to get stronger, have easier fights and so on. And I think that we will also spice up the genre with some new elements, for example I could think of an idea where you don't have unlimited time for your turns, but some kind of panic level, and when that increases, the time for your turns will become shorter. And if you don't choose an action in the time, your character might just do an auto attack or maybe even attack the own group. And finally, the examples for JRPGs are the well-known Final Fantasy series, Kingdom Hearts, Breath of Fire, or Darkest Dungeon. Then there are the action RPGs, which are very similar to the JRPGs, including all of those role-playing characteristics, as well as an open world and a very detailed storyline. The difference, though, is that action RPG are mostly about a single character that wants to accomplish something in the world he or she is living in. So there are rarely group fights, but the protagonist is acting as an individual. Also, the combat system is quite different. So usually it's some kind of action combat where you have different moves on your keyboard keys and mouse keys that you have to use wisely in order to defeat your enemies. And examples for action RPGs are the Skyrim series or the Witcher series. Then there is the possibility to vote for a dungeon crawler. So those games are usually played from a top-down perspective. And you've got a character fighting your way through a dungeon that is full of enemies and traps and so on. Mostly you will need to reach the end of the dungeon to unlock a new one that will become more difficult. And on that way try to level up, gain some new skills, as well as finding items. Maybe we could also set it up so you can play the dungeons with different characters that you can toggle between. And the combat system is usually done so that you have different skills that you can activate using your numerical keys, and then kind of have to aim and click somewhere to cast them. Examples for good dungeon crawler games are either the Diablo series or Torchlight. Then we thought about a 3D side-scroller, so you've got all the mechanics of basic 2D side-scrollers like Mario or Ori and the Blind Forest. So basically it's about jumping, running and dodging various enemies, traps or attacks in order to reach the end of the level. There are various maps that you have to complete, and that may lead to some kind of boss fights like you have them in Mario. Also, it's quite common that you have to find some kind of pickups in the level that will increase your store or regain some HP, things like that. And you need to do all of this in a certain time limit. Finally, the last option is to vote for a shooter game. I think this genre is kind of obvious because it's really popular at the moment. So we could do either a first person or a third person shooter, but we won't only focus on the action part, also add a hopefully very deep and interesting storyline to that. Still, we would keep some of the traditional elements like fighting with multiple weapons that you can find in the world. All have different effects, strength and weaknesses. Combat system is also very obvious, so you have to aim at your enemies and shoot at them, or hide and sneak up to your enemies to kill them without having them notice you. Often there is also the ability to play with your environment, so maybe shoot some kind of wire that will then fall down on your enemies and shock them. Example for those kind of story-driven shooter games are the Deus Ex series or Fallout. Alright, those are the options you can vote for to decide the genre of our community game project. I hope you're fine with the options that we chose, and remember you can have multiple votes if you're not quite sure what to vote for. Voting will end on Tuesday, and I'll let you know what kind of option we will decide on in the end. Okay, thank you for watching and see you in the next episode.